Okay, this is lesson 29, which we did not have a chance to go over in class. This is about multiplying fractions. And we're going to start off by trying to understand what it means when we multiply fractions. In this picture here, I've got a half circle, and I have cut it in half and shaded half of the half. So I shaded half of half, and that gives me 1/4. You can see that this is 1/4 of the circle. So when I took half of 1/2, I got 1/4. A lot of times in math, whenever you see the word of, it often means multiply. So we see that 1/2 of 1/2 means 1/4, and when we find 1/2 of 1/2, we're actually multiplying. That's what it means. So the problem becomes 1/2 times 1/2. That means 1/2 of 1/2. So half of a half, 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. So what we find out is that when we want to multiply fractions, it's very simple. All we have to do is multiply the numerator times the numerator and the denominator times the denominator. So if you have your notes, you can fill that in where it says when we multiply fractions, we multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. So that is on your notes for lesson 29 right here. So you should fill that in. Numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. All right. Now, if we wanted to find out what fraction 1/2 of 3/4 is, then what we could do is we could first of all do it by looking at our circles. So we're going to try to find 1/2 of 3/4. What does that mean? All right, well, this circle, 3/4 of it are shaded. Okay, there's 1/4 here, and then 1/4 here, and 1/4 here. If I take half of that, and I broke it up into eighths just so I could do that, if I were to take half of it, I would be taking, let me pick a different color, blue. If I take half of that, there's 6 pieces there. So I'm going to take 3 of those. And that part is half of 3/4. And that turns out to be 3/8. 1, 2, 3/8. All right, so 1/2 of 1/4 just means 1/2 times 3/4. And that is multiplying. Sorry about this, my pen is not working very well. I want to erase, but it's turning red. There we go. So 1/2 of 3/4 is 1/2 times 3/4, which equals 1 times 3 over 2 times 4, which is 8. And that's what we got when we did it with a picture. So it means the same exact thing. It means you are multiplying when you take, when you say of, a fractional part of another fraction. So the basic idea is that when we multiply fractions, we simply multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. So if I want to multiply 3/4 times 2/3, I multiply 3 times 2, I get 6, and then 4 times 3, gives me 12. And if I want to write that in the lowest terms possible, I want to reduce that. 6/12 means 1/2. And we're going to talk about that more in just a minute. All right, if I want to multiply a whole number by a fraction, like this, 4 times 2/3, then I just have to remember that 4 is a fraction. It's just the denominator of it is 1. 4 is 4 over 1. So any whole number can be written as a fraction. You just give it the denominator 1. So now when I multiply 4 times 2/3, I multiply numerator times numerator. 4 times 2 is 8. And then 1 times 3 is 3. So I have 8/3. And if I want to reduce that and write it as a mixed number, then I remember that every time I get 3/3, I have a whole. So this is 3/3, so that's one whole. And then another 3/3, that would make 6/3. That would be another whole. And then I would have 2/3 left over to get the 8. So that's going to be 2/3. So I've got 2 and 2/3. 8/3 is just 2 and 2/3 because 3 goes into 8 2 times with 2 left over. So 2 and 2/3. So if you think about it as a division problem, 3 into 8, 3 goes into 8 2 times with 6 left over. And 2 times, and 2 times 3 is 6. 8 minus 6 is 2. 3 does not go into 2, so 2 is the remainder. So 2/3. 2 and 2/3. Okay, now we are going to reduce fractions by dividing the numerator and the denominator by a common factor. This is easier, and really this is the way that you're going to do this from now on, instead of having to work with manipulatives or think about circles. You're just going to find a common factor between the numerator and the denominator and then reduce the fraction all the way. If you want to do it all the way in one step, you're going to use the greatest common factor. Okay, so if I have the fraction 6/12 and I want to reduce that, then what I can notice is that 6 has a common factor with 12. Actually, it has more than one common factor with 12. 2 goes into 6 and it goes into 12. 3 goes into 6 and it goes into 12. 6 goes into 6 and 6 goes into 12. Since 6 is the greatest common factor, I'm going to use that, and that'll help me reduce it in one step. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to divide the numerator and the denominator by that common factor. Okay, so I can divide 6 divided by 6 on the top, and then 12 divided by 6 on the bottom. And I need to get that equal sign out of the way because it kind of doesn't look too good there. Okay. So I'm dividing the top and the bottom of the fraction by 6 because it's a common factor between the two, between the top and the bottom, and I'm allowed to divide the top and the bottom by 6. It doesn't change anything as far as what this fraction means. Okay, so 6 divided by 6 is 1, and 12 divided by 6 is 2. So I end up with 1/2. 6/12 equals 1/2. So to reduce a fraction without needing to use your circles or manipulatives of any kind, all you have to do is find a factor that is shared between the top and the bottom. Now, if you don't choose the greatest common factor, it's okay. It'll just take you more than one step to get it all the way down to the most reduced form. So if you saw 8 and 12 and you thought, oh, they have a common factor of 2, I'll divide the top and the bottom by 2. So I divide the top by 2, I divide the bottom by 2, and I get, sorry, the top is 8 divided by 2, that's 4, and then the bottom is 12 divided by 2, that's 6. All right, well, that is more reduced than 8/12, but it's not as reduced as it can get, because 4, 6, there's still a common factor between 4 and 6. They both have a factor of 2. So we can, again, divide the top and the bottom by 2. And we will get 4 divided by 2 on top is 2, and 6 divided by 2 on the bottom is 3. So now we have the fraction all the way reduced to 2/3. It can't go any further. 2 and 3 don't have any common factors, so there's no way we can reduce this further. Now, if back when we had it at 8/12, we had used the greatest common factor between 8 and 12, instead of using 2, which is not the greatest common factor, we could have used 4, which is the greatest common factor, then we would have gotten to 2/3 in one step. But so it's best to use the greatest common factor when you're dividing the top and the bottom to reduce the fraction. But if you maybe don't realize what the greatest common factor is, and you use a factor that is common but it's not the greatest, that's okay. You'll just have to keep doing this until it gets all the way down to a fraction that can't be reduced anymore. So this, we would say this is in lowest terms, or this fraction is completely reduced. 8/12 is equal to 2/3. All right, let's do this problem. Let's multiply it and then let's reduce it. So this is a whole number divided by 5/12. 2 can be written as a fraction. You just put it over 1. Anytime you have a whole number, you can just change it to a fraction by writing the whole number divided by 1. So 2 over 1 times 5/12. If we multiply it, we multiply numerator times numerator. 2 times 5 is 10. Denominator times denominator. 1 times 12 is 12. And now we want to reduce this fraction because we see that there is a common factor between 10 and 12. The greatest common factor between 10 and 12 is 2. Nothing bigger will go into both 10 and 12. So I'm going to divide the top by 2 and the bottom by 2. It has to be the same number. I can't multiply the top by one thing and the bottom by another thing. I have to multiply the top or divide the top and the bottom by the same number. 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So this is the reduced fraction for 10/12, and it can't be reduced any further because 5 and 6 don't have any common factors. Nothing will go into both 5 and 6. Actually, 5 is prime, so nothing will go into 5 except 1 and 5. So that's how we can reduce fractions. Instead of using our manipulatives, we can just divide the top and the bottom by a common factor between the top and the bottom. So here's a little example where we have a ratio, and ratios and fractions look exactly alike. There were 8 baseball bats and 12 baseball gloves in the bag. What was the ratio of bats to gloves in the bag? So when we write a ratio, we write it just like a fraction. The ratio of bats to gloves looks like this. Bats is on top and gloves is on the bottom. Bats to gloves. All right, and in this problem, they tell us we have 8 bats and 12 gloves. So the ratio is 8 to 12. We can reduce a ratio the same way we reduce a fraction. We look for a common factor between the top and the bottom. What number will go into 8 and will go into 12 and is the biggest possible one that will do that? That is 4. 4 goes into 8 and 4 goes into 12. So if we divide the top and the bottom of this fraction by 4, it will reduce the fraction down to lowest terms. 8 divided by 4 is 2. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So this fraction reduces to 2/3. So the ratio of bats to gloves is 2 to 3 in the reduced form. So you can reduce ratios exactly the same way that you reduce fractions. So that is the end of lesson 29, and that is just multiplying fractions, multiply numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator, or reduce a fraction, and that is by dividing the numerator and denominator both by the greatest common factor between the numerator and the denominator. All right, so that's the end of lesson 29.